Let's learn how to write a rhetorical summary. A summary is a statement that condenses information and reflects the gist of a larger text. Gist is the central idea. An example would be, I didn't catch every word between them, but heard enough to get the gist of the conversation. So we do this all the time. If we're summarizing a movie for somebody, we just give them the gist of the movie, what it was about, without a lot of the details. Summaries are basically a smaller, condensed version of a larger piece of writing. They use your own words, and you don't get to change the ideas. You're supposed to express what the author said, but in your own words. So that makes it different from other pieces of writing where you get to express your opinion. You don't get to do that really in a summary. We just want to represent what the author thinks is important. So if this lady here wrote something, we want to make sure that our readers understand what her point was, and we want to express that information in a fair and objective way. It's essential to be able to summarize in college writing because it means that you're a reader who comprehends what they read. It helps you develop your critical thinking because you start to see other people's perspectives more clearly. Your readers are more inclined to read what you write and agree with you if they can tell that you are a smart, engaged, and respectful writer and thinker. And we use summaries as evidence in research papers in a lot of different classes in college. Here's an example of a regular summary of Shitty First Drafts by Anne Lamott. And you can pause this if you'd like to look at it a little more closely. Next, I'm going to show you an example of a rhetorical summary. You can see that it's a little bit longer. That's because it's got some extra information in it that the regular summary doesn't have. What is a rhetorical summary? It's not just what the text said, like a regular summary would give you, but it's also how it was said and how it was put together. So there's different parts to a rhetorical summary. You have the basic information, the overall thesis, how the thesis is supported, signal phrases, transitions, and information about the intended audience and tone. So let's go through all of those parts. Basic information goes right at the beginning. It's like the first half of the first sentence. So you can see here we know basic information about what the text was called, where it came from, who wrote it, and a little bit of information about who wrote it. The second half of that first sentence will be overall main idea or thesis. So now we know what the main point was that the writer was trying to get across. Next, we have how the author supports the thesis, and you'll see this takes up the bulk of the middle of the rhetorical summary. And it's very similar to what you would find in a regular summary. Signal phrases are used, and they're kind of sprinkled throughout. You'll see those in bold, blue, gray there. Transitions are also kind of sprinkled throughout. You'll see them in orange. They help our readers understand the chronology of the original text that we're summarizing. And then you have information at the end about audience and tone. So how do we write this? Well, first you want to begin by writing a does-says statement for each paragraph. Then you want to see where those paragraphs work together to make a larger point. At this point, you should be able to do number 3, where you can identify the thesis. After that, you can try to identify the audience and tone, and then you can just put it all together into something that looks and sounds like a rhetorical summary. So, does says paragraphs. For every paragraph that you read, you want to annotate it either with pen and paper, or maybe you have an electronic annotation tool that you use on your computer or smartphone. But for each paragraph, you want to identify a statement about what it's doing. Is it introducing something? Is it defining something? Is it summarizing something? Comparing and contrasting a couple things, giving some evidence, concluding. And so you're basically trying to figure out the function of the paragraph. What is it doing to serve the larger purpose of the entire text? Says statement is a little bit more simple. You just basically sum up the ideas in your own words. And if you do a does and says statement for each paragraph, you'll really start to understand how the whole text works, and you'll be in a much better position to go ahead and write a full rhetorical summary of it. So then what you want to do is just read through all those does, says statements, generalize. You can see where two or more consecutive paragraphs can be combined. For example, maybe there's two paragraphs that are comparing and contrasting something, or three paragraphs being used to define something. And so you can kind of see where the major sections are. And all of this information will take up the how author supports thesis section. You remember that was the middle chunk that takes up the bulk of it. At this point, you can try to identify the author's thesis. So basically try to write what you think the writer's point is, and don't look at the original. Remember that their thesis is not necessarily at the beginning of the text, and it might not actually be in the essay. It may be implied. Like you're just supposed to, from everything that the author says, you're supposed to understand the implied thesis. So after you've written down what you think the writer's point is, go back and read the original again. If the author has said basically what you just wrote, then you may have found the stated thesis. Stated means it's right in there in the text, and you could just pull it out as a quote. If you don't see anything in the original like that, then you may have just located the implied thesis. Implied means the author meant for readers to figure out her overall point, and you may have just found that. So that's one way to identify an author's thesis. Now it should be time to write the first sentence. So here's a template in title, year published, occupation of author, author name, active verb, and thesis. That's a template you can use, and the example about Obama's war on schools is basically that template filled in with actual information. You'll see the word in at the beginning, and then a title, and then where it was published and when, and then Diane Ravitch and her occupation. Argues, that's the active verb, argues. And then we have the thesis. Here's some more examples of correct ways to write the first sentence. The first one at the top is the one we just looked at. It starts with in Obama's war on schools, so in the title. You could also start with the information about the author. Author and former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg explains. Explains is the active verb, and how oversized beverages impose a health threat to all citizens of the U.S. That is the thesis. And then the information about the title and publication come at the end. Incorrect ways to write the first sentence. You don't want to do it like this. I'm going to read these out so you can see how they sound. In the article, How Much Does It Really Cost to Eat Healthy, written by Tara Parker Pope, said that it costs $7 a day for people to eat, and 1 billion people live off $1 a day or less. Articles don't say things, so you don't want to say an article said anything. And you could just correct that by taking out written by and just say, in the article, How Much Does It Really Cost to Eat Healthy, comma, Tara Parker Pope says that it costs $7 a day. The next one, Christina Zdanowicz, a reporter for CNN in the online article 10-Year-Old Shooter, I Want to Be an Inspiration. She suggests that guns are not as dangerous as we think. The problem there is that the first sentence is called a fragment. It has no verb. It's just a big, long introduction to a sentence. So you could correct that by taking out the period, changing it to a comma, and taking out the word she. And you essentially have Christina Zdanowicz as the subject of the sentence and suggest as the verb. And yeah, so that's the way you fix that one. The next one I see a lot. In Inside Tinder's Hookup Factory, 2014 period. That is also a sentence fragment. And that's not going to work either. And then the last one, in Inside Tinder's Hookup Factory by Vanessa Giordatis, she suggests that. That one's a lot closer, but it's redundant. You don't want to say the author's name and she. You could just take out by and she, and you could make it say, in Inside Tinder's Hookup Factory, Vanessa Giordatis suggests that the smartphone app Tinder is completely changing the dating scene for Americans. So don't write your first sentence like that. Now you should be in a position to identify the author's audience. So these are some questions to ask. Basic knowledge. Can you tell that the writer is writing for people who already know the basic knowledge about the topic or who don't? Think about the reader's attitude. Does it seem like the author is writing for people who may likely disagree with what the author's saying, or more agree, or maybe be on the fence, undecided? The next one says, if the author is trying to make some change happen, either in readers' actions or their thoughts, who are the people the author is trying to convince? That can help you figure out the author's audience. Look at the way that the author supports her thesis. Is it based on stories, hard scientific evidence? What kind of people would be persuaded by this? And then lastly, consider age, gender, culture, occupations, education level, and socioeconomics, all kinds of demographics to help you figure out who you think the intended audience might be. And then identifying tone. What is tone? It's the author's expressed attitude towards the topic. So here's some examples of tone. A writer could take a formal tone, very kind of formal and not using too much slang or conversational type of language. Serious, witty. They could be warm. They could be optimistic or sarcastic or bitter. A great way to describe an author's tone is to use two adjectives: formal yet optimistic, bitter, scathing, warm and playful. That's a great way to really get across the tone to your readers. Here's some examples of tone. I know some very great writers you love who write beautifully and have made a great deal of money, and not one of them sits down routinely feeling wildly enthusiastic and confident. That's a sarcastic tone, assuming that she knows who the writers we love are is sarcastic. Bringing up money while you're talking about writing is kind of sarcastic. Routinely, meaning every day, being wildly enthusiastic, that's just sarcastic. She's kind of going over the top there to make a point. I know so I've taken that same sarcastic quote and turned it into an objective quote with an observational tone. I know many great writers who are very popular, and not one of them begins their day without experiencing some doubt about their abilities. So that I changed the tone there to make it not sarcastic. A formal tone would be the intent to persuade other people spontaneously increases the emotionality of individuals' appeals via the words they use. Super formal tone. I took that one and made it informal. Differences in word choice can reflect the importance of our messages and increase their impact. Finally, once you put all of your rhetorical summary together, you want to read your writing out loud to see what it sounds like. It'll expose bad sentences. Let other people read. Check against examples. Rhetorical summaries are also often called rhetorical précis, Precis, which is like a French word for summary. So if you want to look up examples, you could Google rhetorical précis examples or rhetorical summary examples. And then just remember that you don't have to be perfect on the first try. Keep trying to learn and get better. Mistakes actually are good things because it means that we are learning. Good luck.